If you are a doctor like me, or a dentist, a nurse, or other healthcare professional, hopefully you're aware that you can claim tax rebates that could be worth thousands of pounds on the professional expenses that you incur doing your job, including subscription fees, some exam fees, and in some cases, the cost of washing and repairing your uniform. Hopefully you also know that you can claim these expenses yourself for free using our free guide that has helped over 50,000 doctors, dentists, and other healthcare professionals to make a claim. But recently, HMRC made it harder for us to claim, replacing an easy-to-use online system with a paper form. A paper form where using the wrong abbreviation could cost you thousands of pounds. So we wanted to fight back against this to make it as easy as possible for you to claim. And this video is a replay of a live teaching session that we held recently on YouTube, where we take you through everything you need to know to claim, like how to claim, how many years back you can claim, and if you've never claimed before, you're going to enjoy that bit, what you can claim, and some common mistakes to avoid. Then we get into answering all your questions about claiming. All the free resources that you need are in the show notes down below, and if you download the guide, the next time that we do a live session on YouTube, we'll invite you too. Drop your questions in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button, that really helps us. What helps us even more is if you subscribe to the channel. And what helps us even more than doing that is if you share this information with your colleagues so that they can benefit as well. Thanks so much for watching. Hope that it helps. Awesome. Okay. Well, hopefully we are live on YouTube. If you can see and hear us on YouTube, can you give us a thumbs up in the chat just to let us know that we are all good? Awesome. Getting loads of thumbs up and loads of heart emojis, which is good. Brilliant. So, as I said, this is our first time on YouTube because, which is kind of strange because we just worked out that we've been doing Medics Money together for 8 years now. So if you don't know, my name is Dr. Tommy Perkins and I am a GP and one half, the unqualified half of Medics Money, and my other half is very much qualified.
Yep. Hi guys, I'm Ed, and I am a salaried GP down on the South Coast. But before I went to medical school, I was a chartered accountant and a chartered tax advisor at PwC. Still am a chartered accountant, still am a chartered tax advisor, and hoping to use some of that knowledge today to help you guys out.
Absolutely, because as we're going to find out, HMRC have recently changed how tax rebates are claimed. That is very annoying. Ed is going to guide you through exactly what you need to do. So Ed's going to speak for about 30 minutes on what you need to do and how to claim. And in that time, you can ask your questions in the chat. And we have Andy, who is a specialist medical accountant and expert, roaming the chat under his own name, Andy Powell. And then after 30 minutes, we are just going to dip into all of your questions in the chat because we want to answer as many of your questions as possible tonight. If you want to ask a question in the chat, you have to subscribe. It's totally free to subscribe. So hit the subscribe button, wait 1 minute, and then you should be good. But I'm going to hand over to you.
Perfect. Sounds good. All right. Thank you very much, Tommy. I'm going to move a little bit over, get myself a bit more central. Just going to get the slides ready. Lovely. Thank you, Tommy. All right, guys. So today we are going to be talking about one element of UK taxation. And I'm sure a lot of you guys will know that it's actually your tax liabilities over your lifetime. They're actually the biggest expense that you're likely to incur over that lifetime. Okay. The tax burden, we all know, is at the highest it's been for 70 years. You've probably seen that in the news, in the newspapers. The tax liability, the tax burden, is rising at the moment. It's going to be the highest in the G7 by 2029. And just for the avoidance of doubt for people in the comments, this is not about not paying tax. It's very important to pay tax. We need that to fund the NHS. We're not trying to imply that doctors shouldn't pay tax. But what we do want is for people to pay the right amount of tax. And if you're not claiming your professional expenses, your employment expenses, you're going to be overpaying your tax. So one way to legitimately minimize your tax liability is to claim tax relief on those expensive professional expenses and Royal College exams. As Tommy mentioned, HMRC very frustratingly changed the way in which claims are made on the 14th of October. So originally, you could make the claim online and it was fairly easy to do. Now, everyone has to complete a postal form called P87, fill that all out, and then send that to them along with receipts. So, what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about some brief essential tax knowledge, first of all, and then we're going to talk about tax relief for allowable employment expenses. Okay, we're going to focus mainly on professional expenses, but not solely. We're going to talk about other expenses as well. And we're going to go through the P87 form and our free Medics Money guide to making your claim. You should be able to see on YouTube here on the left a QR code to download our free guide for doctors. On the right, you can see the QR code for nurses. There's also a link in the bottom right of most of the slides as well. If you're not a doctor or a nurse, I would probably recommend downloading the doctor's guide and the nurse's guide. We're going to come onto that a little bit more down the line, but it has a lot about flat rate expenses that nurses can claim. But hey, they're both free. Why not download them both and look at them and see which one might be more relevant to yourself? So, as I say, we're going to be going through the guide that we made towards the end. You can see, as I say, the QR codes again on the left and right. We're going to do them. We're going to show them again towards the end, guys. So don't worry if you haven't used them just yet. But it's really important that we go through a couple of things before we start. Okay, so the first thing to say is that this talk really is for employees, and the guide that we go through and that P87 form we're going to show you, all of those things relate to employees. Okay, the rules are different for the self-employed and for companies. That isn't to say that if you're locum in and you're self-employed or you operate via a company that you're not going to learn anything today. You might still, hopefully you'll learn a fair decent amount. But just to say that the guide that we're going to show you, the P87 form we're going to go through, those are for employees. They're a way for employees to claim their employment expenses and get the tax back. It's also really important to note that if you already do a self-assessment tax return, then you need to claim your expenses on that self-assessment tax return, okay? The guide and this P87 form, they do not trump or supersede doing a self-assessment tax return. So if you already do one of those, you need to keep doing that and claiming your expenses on that. You can't use our form, sadly, okay? But as I say, hopefully you guys will still learn something from today either way. So talking about some essential tax knowledge, we're not here to try and patronize anyone, so apologies if you know all this, but we always like to make sure that everyone is on the same page, okay? So I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know that the tax year in the UK, that runs from the 6th of April until the following 5th of April. So currently we're doing this live in November. That is therefore in the 2024 to 2025 tax year, which runs from the 6th of April 2024 until the 5th of April 2025. For most of us, we get a tax-free personal allowance of £12,570. So that's the amount of income you can receive tax-free. And then after that, you apply the non-savings income tax rates. Okay, those rates are 20%, 40%, and 45% in most of the UK. In Scotland, the non-savings rates are 19%, 20%, 21%, 42%, 45%, and 48%. So a fair few more in Scotland. When I say non-savings income, that's the most important types of income, to be honest. So that would include salaries, taxable profits, rental incomes. It doesn't cover it doesn't cover bank interest. That's taxed slightly differently, although the rates are the same. And it doesn't cover dividends, which are also taxed differently and have a different tax rate. If you claim your professional expenses, you're going to be claiming expenses and saving tax at your marginal rate. So just bear in mind, it's a favourite topic at Medics Money, that these may actually be higher than the above rates. So you may actually find in certain income levels, you have a marginal tax rate of 60% or 67.5% in Scotland. And if you're in one of those thresholds, if you're paying tax at that sort of marginal rate, it's even more important that you claim your professional expenses. So claiming tax relief for employment expenses, you can claim for the previous 4 tax years. So you can go quite far back. You can also make a claim for the current tax year that we're in. So for example, if you make the claim on today's date, in November 2024, you can claim for all the expenses that you incurred from the 6th of April 2020 all the way up until the current date. And it's important to note that you claim in the tax year that the expense was incurred. So, for example, I've got an example here. If you paid £200 for an allowable expense in March 2023 and £250 a few months later in May 2023, you would be claiming that £200 in the 2022 to 2023 tax year, and then £250 would actually fall into the 2023 to 2024 tax year. Yeah, so expenses are claimed in the tax year in which they were incurred. What is allowable in terms of employment expenses? Well, they fall broadly into 5 main categories. The first category is the most important one and the one we're going to be really talking about today, but they are professional fees or subscriptions paid to an organisation approved by HMRC, and we'll come on to that in a bit later. The second category, payments made by an employee to an occupational pension scheme. So if you make a payment to the NHS pension scheme, which is an occupational pension scheme, the law says you get a tax deduction for that. Certain travel expenses, you can also get tax relief for those. Possibly less relevant, the fourth category put in the legislation is any charitable donations made by an employee through their payroll. Probably not going to really, a lot of people, it's not going to really be important to many people, but that is the fourth point. And the fifth category are expenses under what's called the general rule, which sadly makes it really, really hard to claim anything else. So if you don't fall into one of those 4 categories at the top, you have to basically meet the golden rule, which is, or the general rule, sorry, which is very difficult to meet. I will talk a little bit more about that. You're not here to be tax experts, but I find it's quite useful to know a little bit about what it says so that you can then realise why some expenses may or may not be allowable. So in terms of allowable professional expenses, so expenses that you can claim for as a healthcare professional, as a doctor, they're mainly going to be your GMC fee, and that includes your CCT fee. Okay, we see a lot of people that forget to claim the CCT fee, so make sure you claim that. Your MDU, MPS, MDDUS fees, those are allowable. Your BMA fee, if you pay into the BMA, that's allowable. And your Royal College membership fee as well, that is also allowable. As I said before, HMRC actually have a list of all the professional bodies that you can pay a subscription to, which are allowable for tax relief. They call it list free. You can see the link there, or if you just Google HMRC list free, you can get the list there. It's important to note that other allowable costs include any examination fees incurred for those really expensive Royal College exams, as long as they're mandatory under your training contract. And that includes any resets. So if you don't pass your exam first time round and you have to reset, you can claim that reset cost as well. You should also really be able to claim any associated costs incurred because of the exam. So if you have to go to a hotel because of the exam is in a different city really early in the morning, you should be able to claim for that as well. Expenses that aren't allowable. So sadly, there are some that we incur as doctors that you can't usually claim. And those include, among other things, the following. So the first thing is any fees that your employer has actually paid for you, for example, through your study budget. I mean, I guess that is fair enough. If you haven't actually incurred the expense yourself, then realistically, you shouldn't really get a tax deduction for it, okay? The other ones, sadly, aren't, in my opinion, fair, but that's nothing to do with it, really. It's the law. So essentially, you can't really claim for the following. So any fees for revision courses that you take for your exams, sadly, you can't claim those. You can't claim the fees for any diplomas taken or any continuing professional development that you do, such as courses or webinars. If you attend a conference and you spend money on that, sadly, you can't make a claim for those. Even more unfairly, you can't really claim for your ALS, ATLS, NLS, PLS, etc. If you end up having to pay for those yourself. The reason being is that they don't fall into one of those 4 categories I mentioned, those 4 specific categories. So they have to meet the general rule. The general rule says that an expense is only allowable if it's incurred wholly and exclusively and necessarily in the performance of employment duties. And what HMRC argue is that a lot of these, so take for example, you attend a conference or you go on a course, HMRC will say it's not a necessary expense, it makes you a better doctor, but it's not necessary for you to actually do that course. They also then argue, if you find a way around that, they also then argue you weren't actually on that course while you were doing your job as a doctor. So you can hopefully see, sadly, why it's quite difficult to make a claim for those expenses. So just a little bit about receipts. So previously, when you were able to make the claim online, you didn't have to send receipts to HMRC unless they asked you for them later on. If they challenged your claim and asked for them, you'd have to send them in. Now, as of the 14th of October, sadly, you do have to send them. You have to post them, the receipts for any expenses that you're claiming. So you're going to need to get those if you don't have them already. In the guide, we've got a one page goes through how you can claim the receipts for various different organizations. You can see an example of it on the right there. But sadly, you do need to get those to make your claim these days. So how do you make a claim? Well, we're going to show you. We're going to go through our Medics Money guide. Just to say, the guide is free. It's step by step. It should hold your hand and take you through it. I've got the link there. The QR codes are there again as well. Two things to say. One I've said already. So if you already complete a tax return, you need to claim your expenses via that tax return. Okay, you don't use our guide. Use your tax return to claim your expenses. And secondly, if you have more than £2,500 of expenses within one tax year, then you need to tell HMRC about that, and they will let you do a tax return for that one tax year, so you can claim all those expenses on that tax return. Okay, if your expenses are going over £2,500 in a tax year, you can't use the P87 form, hence or our guide. Okay, it's not that difficult. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that you might end up incurring more than 2,500 if you pay for more than one exam, for example, in a tax year, because they are very, very expensive. So let's think about the P87 form. You can see the start of it there on the right, and we're going to go through that, how you fill it in. As I say, it's all in our guide. If you'd rather just get the guide and go through it that way, yeah, I would do that. But we're going to go through some of it now, okay? So the first page, I'm not really going to go into, because the first page is all about your personal details, which I'm sure you can all fill in. One thing to say, though, is, again, if your claim is more than £2,500 for any tax year, you need to fill in a self-assessment tax return, and you can find out how to do that. You know, it shows you there, sorry, how you do that. So it's got the link there, or you can call the self-assessment helpline. But I would definitely use the website there and not call them, because you could be on the phone forever. So this is the next part of the P87 form, okay? And this is an extract from our guide again. So in this bit, you fill in your employment details. The first thing you need to do is at the top, in the columns, you can see it says, column A, year ending 5 April 20. So you fill in the last 2 digits to make up the tax year that you want to make a claim for. So in this example, for example, I've said I want to make a claim for the year ending 5th of April 2024, which is the 2023 to 2024 tax year. Next, you need to put in your employer pay-as-you-earn reference, which you can find on your P45s, your P60s, your pay slips. If you had more than one employer in the tax year, you need to put them in separate columns. Okay, so you may have switched hospital trust, for example, in a tax year, in which case you could have column A for the tax year with one employer, and then column B, same tax year, different employer. You then need to put in your job title. So I put in there doctor, but of course, put in whatever your job title is, nurse, phlebotomist, pharmacist, whatever you are, put your job title in there, and then fill out your employer name and the first line of the employer address from your payslips. Actually, in fairness, that isn't mandatory. You could, you don't have to fill that bit in, but I just would. It's not going to take that long to fill it in. So I would fill those out as well. Likewise, your employee number at the bottom, box 2 or row 2.7, Again, not mandatory, but I would fill that in as well. It's just your employee number from your pay slips. The other box that I haven't covered yet, type of industry in box 2.6. You need to enter your type of industry if you're claiming for flat rate expenses. And I'm going to go through those in a bit, okay? If, when we talk about it, you think that flat rate expenses are important to you, and if you've got any nurses listening or watching today, it almost certainly will apply to you. If you think it does, then in that box, I would type healthcare and leave it at that, okay? So how do you claim on the P87 your professional expenses? Well, you claim them in section 4, subscriptions to professional bodies. The first thing you need to do is decide which tax year you're claiming for. So in this case, because in my column A, I wrote at the top, the tax year ending 5th of April 2024, any expenses that I incurred between the 6th of April 2023 and the 5th of April 2024 will be aggregated and put in column A to match up with the tax year that I put in there, okay? First of all, you need to list out your professional bodies. So in my case, I had 3 professional bodies, which you can see there. You may wonder why I've written them in such a strange manner. So it says Medical Council General and not General Medical Council, which is what you'd expect. The reason is I'm basically using the same way that HMRC had put it, to put those professional bodies in their list. It's called List 3, as I mentioned before. Weirdly, they don't put it under General Medical Council or British Medical Association. They put it under Medical Council General and Medical Association British, etc. And I put it that way. You don't have to, okay? But the reason why I do it that way is just because, you know, you've got some poor soul manually checking all these forms, and it probably just makes it a little bit easier for them if they can just match it against their list rather than try and work out what's happening. Once you've worked out which professional bodies you've subscribed to, you paid money to, and you want to claim for, aggregate the amount and put it in box 4.2. You can't split them out separately. You have to put the total. If anyone paid any of that money back to you, if your trust paid some of that for you, you put in the amount that was repaid to you, which may be 0. So put 0 if that's the case, and then put the total in 4.4. And that's just an example for nurses, you know, same thing. So Nursing Royal College of, and Nursing and Midwifery Council. Again, put the amount you've paid, any amounts that were paid to you, and then the expense claimed as a total in 4.4. When you could claim online, you could claim your exam expenses quite easily. There was a separate section for exam expenses, but now they've taken that away, and so therefore we would put exam expenses in section 7 called other expenses. If anyone thinks differently, you know, please do let us know, but this is what we would do, okay? What you need to do is in 7.1, enter the Royal College name and the name of the examination. HMRC actually have a list of medical exams that are allowed. I put the link in the guide. I didn't put it there for space reasons, but it's in the guide. We recommend using the name that they have in their guide, in their list, because sometimes they abbreviate things, sometimes they don't. Especially if they don't abbreviate an exam, I would use the full name. But have a look and see what they think it's called and use that accordingly. And then it's the same as before. You enter the amount of the exam, you enter in anything that was repaid to you, and then the total expense that you're going to be claiming. This section, by the way, is where you would include a few other bits and pieces. So if you have any working from home expenses, this is where you would include them. But note that it's unlikely to be allowed because it has to be mandatory that you work from home. So we get a lot of people asking us, can I claim because, you know, I work 1 day a week in my office at home. You know, it has to be mandatory that you work from home, okay? And as doctors, it's really unlikely, nurses the same, etc. It's unlikely that you're going to be forced to work 24/7 all your work hours at home. This is also where you would include any tools you want to claim, such as replacement, not the initial cost, but a replacement stethoscope or dermatoscope, or whatever it is you're replacing. this is where you'd put that expense as well if you wanted to try and claim for that. But just bear in mind that HMRC often argue that those aren't allowable because in their world, in their fantasy world, they think that our employers, our trusts, GP practices should be paying for those for us. So just bear in mind you may be in for a fight if that's what you want to do. But if you did, that's where you'd put it, okay? So I'm just going to run through some other expenses that can be claimed. Mileage allowance, that can be important for some people. You can claim mileage allowance if you use your own vehicle for work. So travel expenses, just bear in mind that they're only allowable for journeys which you make to or from a place that you have to attend in the performance of your duties. So a classic one would be home visits. You cannot claim mileage allowance for your normal commute, but you can for anything else where you're made or it's mandatory for you to attend in the performance of your duties. You can see the rates there. So if you have a car, you can claim up to 45 pence per mile for the first 10,000 business miles, 25 pence per mile after the first 10,000 business miles. If you're on a motorbike, it's a flat 24p per mile. If you have a bike, it's 20p per mile. It's quite a pain in the bottom to claim for these. So just warning you now, if you do want to make a claim for mileage allowance, then you have to send in a mileage log, which will include dates, the amount of miles you did, the reason for the journey, the postcodes at the start and end of the journey. And if your employer doesn't give you any mileage allowance at all, you need to get them to send you a letter which says that they don't give you anything. So they need to confirm that. Also, I should probably add as well, if you find that let's say you've got a really, really generous employer and they pay you more than the rates in this table, just bear in mind that you actually may owe HMRC some money. Okay, so just watch out for that. So flat rate expenses. So we're going to talk about doctors first. We're going to come into nurses. Flat rate expenses, allowances, they can be claimed by certain industries and professions which HMRC are aware have to incur various costs as part of their profession. So they try and make it easier by allowing a flat rate to be claimed. Doctors actually aren't included on their list of professions where this applies to, but recently they seem to have softened and they've said that they put in their guidance that doctors can claim for laundering uniform expenses as long as they're required to wear a uniform as part of their duties, and they have to meet the cost of that laundry themselves. If it does apply to you, if you meet the rules, I put more about the rules in the guide that you can download, then you can claim a flat rate of £60, or if you spend more than £60 laundering your scrubs, etc., you can claim for more as long as you send in receipts. And like I said at the start, put healthcare into the industry box in that section 2 of the form. Nurses, well, they are specifically included as a profession, as are a number of other professions. So that would include pharmacists, phlebotomists, healthcare assistants, dental nurses, midwives, even porters, security guards, if they're in a hospital, are covered by this. And if so, if you're on that list, you can claim a flat rate of £125 or more if you send receipts for repairing, replacing, cleaning your uniform. You can also claim £18 for repairing and or replacing shoes and stockings. Very generous. So a total of up to £143 can be claimed without receipts for nurses and those other professions, or more if you actually do submit receipts. And again, put healthcare in the industry box in section 2. So once you've filled out the form, next steps will basically in section 10 tick the box that says you want HMRC to send you a check. Then fill out your name and the date in the declaration, print it out, and sign it. So you print the form out, you sign the declaration, you got to post it to HMRC. I'm really sorry, the address is in the guide. I meant to put it in this slide here, but you're sending it to pay as you earn and self-assessment team at HMRC. Make sure you keep a copy for your records, of course, so that's really important. And you need to make sure you include all those receipts that I mentioned. So any professional expense you're claiming, include the receipts for your exams, any of those mileage logs I mentioned, and receipts for laundry and uniforms if you're claiming more than £60 or £143 for nurses, or you're claiming any replacement tools. And then hopefully HMRC will send through a check and a revised tax calculation called a P800. The reason I say hopefully is because we've got to be honest here, guys. We all know that especially in hospital, the payroll departments aren't stellar when it comes to getting your pay right, getting your tax right, okay? And sometimes, this is the minority of people, sometimes people are not having the correct amount of tax deducted from their pay slips. So when you submit these forms, if that has happened, and sometimes HMRC will be aware that you haven't paid quite enough tax, and some people end up having to pay some tax. Okay, it's the minority of people. Now, just to say, you would still owe that tax. So doing this claim doesn't mean that suddenly you owe tax. Okay, doing this claim just means that you find out about it sooner than you would do otherwise. Because at some point, HMRC will realise and say, hang on a minute, you owe some tax. So at least if you make this claim, you'll owe less tax than you would otherwise. And then once you've made your claim on that P87 form, HMRC will amend your tax code going forward. So your tax code, you'll have seen that on your pay slips. We talk about it quite a lot at Medics Money, so there are lots of resources online all about tax codes. But this is an example of what it would look like. So you have your personal allowance, because that's always the starting point for a tax code. So £12,570, as we said. And then HMRC, this person here has claimed £1,214 of expenses on the P87. So HMRC have changed their tax code. So now their tax code is going to be 13764 and then converted into a tax code format. That means that this person is going to, over the course of the tax year, get just over £100 of expenses deducted every month. So they get their tax relief every month rather than having to make a claim at the end of the year. So those are the guides again. The links have been posted all over the place. Hopefully that was useful. Hopefully Andy's and Tommy and Matthew have been answering questions in the chat, but if there are any questions, happy to take some now. Tommy's coming in.
I'm shuffling back in. Apparently, half my face was missing before. We have to get uncomfortably close to each other.
It's a very small camera.
I've also got a rash on my neck. Don't worry, it's not contagious. I've just been in my wetsuit a lot.
Go over here quickly.
Because there's been a lot of wind and waves. Awesome. Okay, there's loads of questions in the chat. Andy has been doing sterling work in there. We're going to get into Q&A now. So any questions, drop them in the chat and we will take them. Before we did that, I just wanted to mention that claiming a tax rebate is good, and we've done a poll with some numbers on it. But if you want to fix all of your finances, okay, so your pension, your investments, learn how to manage your money. What we weren't taught at medical school, well, you were taught it at medical school. Well, you know it.
Before medical school.
Before medical school. Okay, what I wasn't taught at medical school, then we have an online course. The next cohort starts on January 29th. Can you believe that's our third cohort already? It feels like we only just started it.
Yeah, it comes by fast.
Yeah, so it's very, very popular. Every cohort so far is sold out. In fact, we're only supposed to have 100 on the current cohort, but somehow we end up 112. But anyway, scan that and apply there, and we will show you how to fix your entire finances. But back to today, questions. So I'm going to try and keep... So Andy's taken loads in the chat. One of the early questions was, are HMRC likely to switch this back online? Why did they switch it, right? Because it's annoying.
Yeah, so it's gone back to paper because there was a large amount of fraudulent claims that they were seeing, robotic claims as well. So they're getting bombarded by fraudulent robotic claims online. They're also trying to clamp down on certain forms of tax advisors, as it were, that are trying to help people claim tax rebates, but taking a chunk of the rebate money as well. They're trying to make it harder for that to happen. They want taxpayers to do it themselves. Hopefully it will come back online, because it was a much better system online, much better. And I think it will do. I think they would much prefer it themselves. I don't think they're enamored by this change. But of course, he's got a crystal ball. Who knows when it will come back?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the key point for me about it going to paper is that bit that you mentioned where if you write BMA, there's a chance that it might not be on their list. The person looking at that list is no longer a robot, where the robots were reliable-ish. It's going to be a human being.
Yeah.
Combine doctor's handwriting with abbreviations, you can see why people might miss out on things. So what Ed said about writing Medical Association British and not just BMA, like get it as close as you can to that, because if they don't see it on their list, they may not allow it. Okay, so that is the danger with all paper, really, isn't it? Like I say, doctor's handwriting plus abbreviations is just fraught with error, and these are big amounts that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely one of I mentioned if you have more than 2,500, you can't use the guide for that one tax year. You have to use self-assessment. I mean, I think my registrar year as a GP, I claimed something like 2,250, so I wasn't that far off that deadline. I think in my final 4 years, I've claimed something like £6,000 of expenses. You know, it really does add up. It's worth worth doing.
Well, on that note, whilst you were speaking, I ran a little poll of people that have claimed how much did they get. So 35% of people got between £500 and £1,000.
Nice.
25% of people got over £1,000. If anyone wants to put, if anyone feels comfortable putting what the maximum, like let's have a competition in the chat, who got the most. But I want to talk about this. 8% of people got zero, right? Now you did mention this in your talk that yes, you got zero, but it's not as bad as it could have been, because essentially, well, you can explain it, mate.
Yeah. So, okay, it's not, you know, everyone would like to fill out one of these forms and put in all their expenses. Everyone wants to get a tax rebate, right? That's what you're hoping for. You're hoping to pay less tax and get some get some money back. And sadly, for some people, that doesn't happen. You know, as I alluded to, often what happens is payroll departments just haven't deducted enough tax. Maybe your tax code they're applying was wrong. Maybe they just mucked it up. But what I will say is this: you know, if you don't do those expenses, you know, you actually have a tax bill. So those of you who got zero, I'm guessing you probably actually had to pay some money back. It's actually still better to do it, to make that claim, because you still owe that money. At some point, you'll still have to pay that money back, but now you're paying less money than you would have done otherwise. Okay, so it's still sad. I really feel for you guys, but as I say, you still owe the money. It's just at some point HMRC are going to say to you, "Where's our money?" And if you made the claim, at least it's they're going to ask for less.
Yeah. Sadie's put in the chat on YouTube that they think that it's cynical from HMRC to do this, so that they make it hard so people don't bother to claim. But you're here tonight and you're going to tell everyone that you know, every healthcare professional you know, about this video and the guide. So we are making it as easy as possible, literally step by step, to claim, because it is very annoying. Okay, there's a lot of questions coming in the chat, but I just want to drip back onto one that came in earlier, which was a recurring theme. Do I need to submit the paper forms every year?
Okay, right. The answer, being really, really honest, because we've got to be honest, is at the moment I'm not 100% sure, and I'll tell you why. So if you look at this slide, okay, you know, if you signed up for a personal tax account, and I'd recommend that everyone does sign up for a personal tax account. It's really, really helpful, really handy. I could go on about them forever, but I won't do. I'll save you guys. But honestly, if you haven't done already, set up a personal tax account. Within the personal tax account, you'll be able to see your tax code exactly like this screen here. You can see, and what you can see is this person's claimed, they've done their let's say they've done their P87, they've claimed £1,214 of expenses, and HMRC are fully aware of that. So the question is, well, what happens if you know, the GMC fee goes up by 50 quid and the Royal College fee goes up by 100 quid? You know, what do? Do you have to make the claim all over again, or can you do something different? And you'll see on that slide it says update or remove next to professional subscriptions. So you certainly could use that option to tell HMRC that your expenses have gone up, rather than having to go through all the rigmarole of doing that form. Now, at the moment, because of all this change after the 14th of October, we're not quite sure when you know, if you click on that button, the update button, it's a bit confusing, and we'll be honest, we're a little bit confused by it ourselves.
I mean, it looks like they haven't. It looks like they're work in progress, right?
Yeah, that's it. It's clearly a work in progress. So So first of all, yes, you can do a paper form. I'm sure that that's not a problem at all. It's just a pain. It'd be much nicer if you didn't have to do a paper form, but you can certainly do a paper form. We're actually going to be trying to test this out using me as a test case. I'm going to try and let them know because my expenses have gone up. I'm going to try and use this button to update my professional subscriptions and see what happens. I'm a bit apprehensive because I'm sure it'll be an absolute car crash, but I'm going to give it a go, and I'll let you know at some point whenever I find out what I found out.
Yeah, if you're subscribed to our YouTube or subscribed to our newsletter or listen to our podcast, they are all good ways to find out and stay up with the latest information. Over 60,000 doctors on our email list now. Yes, okay. Now, Andy's putting ones in here that he's not sure about. So, CCT fees, right? This is something that we see missed a lot, not by people that have used our guide because it's like in bold in there.
Yeah.
Can we talk about CCT fees? And someone's asked about Caesar.
Oh yeah, yep. Sorry, I'm just. Yeah. So CCT fees. Yeah, we see that missed all the time. We know it's definitely allowed. HMRC actually have somewhere that says it is allowed.
Yeah. So with Caesar is I can't remember what it stands for, but it's like an alternative route to becoming consultant, right?
Okay.
And the reason you can claim the CCT fee is because it's paid. You pay the GMC like 600 quid to write your name, move your name off one register onto another.
Yeah,
Absolute
it is outrageous.
fraudsters, mate.
Yeah.
Not Medic's Money's opinion.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. So Caesar, I believe, is also paid to GMC. So yeah, if
I'm sure we've been asked this before, and we found out the answer was yes. So I think you can claim Caesar. I mean, is it to the GMC again?
Well, I don't see why it wouldn't, because it's the same principle as when you CCT. They move you from one part of the register to another for the pleasure of £600.
I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, and I would try that one. I'll claim that.
Okay. Really common question here, which is, can you claim an exam expense if you weren't in a training program at the time you took and paid for the exam?
Strictly speaking, you need to have that. What's really important, because HMRC could easily ask for it, is the actual training contract itself. So HMRC will, in the old days, it used to be the case that they would actually ask for your contract. This is the days before, because this PH7 form, it did exist before they then went online, and now of course they've gone backwards and doing a paper form. In the old days, they would definitely ask for training contracts. People would fill out forms that said, under the Banijay case, I'm allowed it because of this. So I mean, the rules are, it has to be mandatory under your training contract. That's my understanding, sadly.
Yeah, I guess as well, we do see cases where HMRC don't apply the rules 100%, allegedly. So there is always, because there's always a story of like, well, my mate claimed it all, and
yeah, the big one we see is ALS. People, ALS shouldn't be allowed under the HMRC have said it's not allowed under their rules, and yet some people in the old days did manage to get the ALS allowed, and then they'll say, "Oh, you're wrong. It is allowable." It's not. Just things do slip through the net. Yeah, they're only human.
Nikki in the chat has said, yes, Caesar is paid to the GMC, but it's 4 times more expensive than CCT.
Oh, what? Oh my God. I mean, my CCT was already outrageous, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, it looked better once I deducted 40% off of it, thanks to the guide. But,
yes.
Okay, good info in the chat there, I think. Awesome. Okay, so I'm just scrolling through. This is one that we get asked a lot, and I know why this person's asked it, because at the start you said there was 5 categories of expenses and you broke them down, and one of them was payments to an occupational pension scheme. Somebody is basically asking, how do I claim the tax relief for my NHS pension? And the answer is,
well, so you don't need to do anything at all with that, okay? So it comes off your, so you get the tax relief. It's all done by payroll, okay? Essentially, unless you're self-employed. So if you're an employee, and today is all about employees, then you'll see on your payslip, you'll see your gross salary for the month. You'll see your NHS pension. Then on that payslip, you should see a taxable income, okay? And that will be your gross salary less your NHS pension, because your NHS pension is tax deductible, and the payroll will deal with that for you, okay? So don't do anything at all for the NHS pension. If you're an employee, it's all done for you.
Yeah, really good question. So many questions in the chat. I'm relying on Andy. He's doing great work to pull out the ones that help as many people as possible, and I think we're answering the other ones in the chat, which is awesome. What else was I going to say? Oh, I was going to say next Tuesday we have another free. Is it next Tuesday?
Yes, yeah, Tuesday, yep, Tuesday.
Good.
Yep.
If you go to medicsmoney.co.uk/live, next Tuesday we have a more holistic around not just tax rebates, how to fix your finances fast. So how to get started improving your finances, talking pensions, investing, bit of tax, obviously. And it's going to answer some of the non-tax rebate questions which we're getting in the chat, but we are trying to stick to tax rebates today, if that's okay, because we want as many people as possible to claim this.
So,
should we start from the bottom?
Yeah, well, there was one about self-assessment. If you do self-assessment, do you need to submit paperwork as well? There's so many questions. I'm really sorry. It was on there. Someone asked about self-assessment, and they said, "Do you have to, regarding receipts, do you need to, submit that paperwork as well?" Actually, no. You don't have to. You can do. You can attach attachments to your tax return. I wouldn't worry. I would break it down. I'd break down what your expenses amount to and who you're paying them to, because there'll be in the employment page. There's an additional information box. So I would put a list in there of all the professional bodies you're paying to and the amounts. But I wouldn't send receipts. If HMRC want them, they'll ask for them. It's a bit of a odd one, isn't it? If you're doing self-assessment, don't bother receipts. If you're doing this form, where are the receipts? It's all very inconsistent. But right now, for self-assessment, I wouldn't send in receipts.
Yeah, I think the fundamental point is you've always needed them if asked. So good practice to have them. From day one, our guide has always had how to find receipts. The slightly annoying thing is now they want you to print it out, burn a few thousand trees, send it to them like it's 1980s.
Yeah,
again.
He's all very
Brilliant.
disappointing.
Okay, PK, really sorry. Actually, I had this on my list to answer and I missed it. So thank you for reposting it. What happens if you've claimed previously, so your tax code has changed, but then your expenses drop?
Well, yeah, to be honest, PK, it goes back to that. I don't know if you heard me talking about this slide. If you click that button that says update or remove, there is a section that says, tell us about a tax-free allowance that's stopped. Okay, so one is when you click that button that says update or remove, there are three options. One is you pick all three or two of them or one of them, whatever you want. But one of them is something that's missing. One is something that's changed, and something that's stopped. So strictly speaking, you think, all right, I'll click that update or remove button, and I'll remove something that I've stopped paying, or I will reduce an amount that I'm now paying less for. But as we said before, they've changed this as well. We're not really 100% sure how that operates at the moment. So you've always got the option to do another P87 form next time round to tell them about the drop. As I say, I'm going to try and tell them about the opposite because my expenses have gone up. I'm going to try and use myself as a test case. We'll see what they say. If that works, and I imagine you can do it the other way around to tell them that your expenses have dropped. But watch this space because we're just not really sure right now.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned earlier, and Andy did answer this. Andy's doing great work in the chat. Thanks, Andy. About how can you see what you've got on your claim already? Is that easy to do?
No, not really. That would be too simple. So that 1214 on that slide that you see there, it doesn't tell you what's that makes up. So you sadly have to kind of remember or log it. If for these P87 forms, the current way of doing things, on the one, it's all rubbish. It's a rubbish system. Nobody wants it. But at least if you take a photocopy and keep it somewhere, at least you'll know what you've claimed for. Because a lot of people claim it electronically and now have no idea what they've claimed for. There's no perfect system, shall we say?
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember when all the claims were done on paper P87 forms. And I think that handwriting thing and the abbreviation that I mentioned is just really key points. Okay, I'm having to sit uncomfortably close to you because of the limits of the screen size. Yes. I believe that we've handled most of the questions in the chat.
Okay.
If this has been useful to you, we are all in this together as healthcare workers. So just tell your colleagues. We've got a guide for the doctors, we've got a guide for the nurses and other healthcare professionals. There's some dentists here as well. Stay tuned for that. So if we haven't answered your question, drop it in the chat now. And of course, stay tuned to Medics Money emails, the Medics Money podcast. I mentioned the live teaching next week. If you go to medicsmoney.co.uk/live, we've got a live session that covers everything about your personal finances, not just tax rebates, because tax rebates is pretty niche.
Yeah, it's pretty niche, but given everything's in flux and just changed, we thought it'd be useful to let everyone know what's happened.
100%. Yeah, it's also our first time on YouTube Live. We normally stick to things that we know, but seems all right.
We'll try and work on the camera, being squeezed in, but other than that, I think hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, we're getting some good feedback as well. Thanks for that. Andy's saying, look in the document. Oh, okay, yeah. This is a great question.
You have 2 employers.
Yeah, so the question is, what do you do if you have 2 employers? Who do you put down?
Yeah, so I would put down both of them. So you'd have, let's say in the year end in 5th of April 2024, you had 2 employers then because you switched over in August. I would have the first employer in column A, and then the second employer in column B. And I'll put the details in as you fill out the details in the columns, and then I'd work out which basically I'd work out what expenses I had in the year and work out the timing of when I actually paid that expense, and then match it against the relevant employer. So if I incurred an expense in July, I would match that against employer 1 if I worked for them up until August, and then if I incurred an expense in September, I would put that against employer 2 in the column. So put them both in.
Yeah, but literally do your bestest handwriting. I realise the irony of that.
Well, you type it's a typed form.
Ah.
Yeah. So most of it you can type. You can print it out and handwrite it, but you can actually just enter it in like I've done here. This is the actual form. You just type it in.
We're doing real time chat here. Laura says, "What if you have 2 employers simultaneously?"
That's fine. Yeah, you can put as many employers as you like in this form. So if you have them simultaneously, also fine. So yeah, put them all in. So HMRC are aware. It may be by the way that you end up if you've got too many employers and too many tax years, you may have to have more than one form. But that's fine. You can send in as many forms as you need to.
Awesome. Okay. Andy's gently reminded us in the chat to look in the document, saying we've finally woken up.
Can uniforms clean again? Yeah, of course you can.
Uniforms, the washing thereof.
Yeah. So if you're a doctor, so basically HMRC have something called flat rate expenses or flat rate allowances for certain things, including the repairing, replacing, the cleaning of uniforms. You have to be a listed profession to be able to get that flat rate allowance. Doctors just weren't on that list, which is unfair, given that a lot of doctors wear scrubs and have to launder those scrubs themselves. So they've basically buckled a little bit. They've softened a little bit, and although they're not on the list, HMRC have said in the guidance that doctors can claim for laundering uniform expenses, so your scrubs, as long as they meet certain rules, such as you're required to wear the uniform as part of your duties, and you've got to meet the cost of laundry yourself. I think in the guide, if you're a doctor, I put the link to what the guidance is, what the actual rules are, okay? So you can have a quick look in there, and you can claim up to £60 if those rules apply to you, or more if you send them in receipts. If you're a nurse, because I'm not sure what profession you are, a nurse or a healthcare assistant or a pharmacist, a phlebotomist, or any of the other listed professions on their little list, you can claim a bit more. You can claim £125 for repairing, replacing, and cleaning uniforms. Again, more if you send in receipts. So hopefully that answers your question.
I shall wait with.
I feel
it's not. Yeah.
We're told off.
Yeah, we've got a shared document on the go where Andy's giving us all the questions, the important ones. So it doesn't do that thing like typing where you're like, what are they going to say? But Andy's doing great work in the chat answering the majority of the questions, which is really, really helpful. We've got a couple more minutes left, and we really want you to get the answers that you need. So if you've got any last questions, drop them in the chat. And
I mean, it's a really good question. I mean, how do you actually show a receipt, send your electricity bill? I would, if you're meeting their rules, I would claim the £60 flat expense. To be honest, yeah, that's it. You don't have to send any receipts, and a lot easier than trying to work out the proportion of your electricity bill for laundry and scrubs, which I totally get is impossible. So yeah, claim £60 if the rules apply to you.
awesome. Okay, I'm just scrolling. So, yeah, so some people have already filled it in. Great. HMRC moving back to the Stone Age, hopefully temporarily and normal. So I hope this video goes out of date.
Yes, yeah, that would be.
And we just go back to the nice online form.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Getting some nice feedback. Thank you for that. Any other questions? We're looking. I'm looking in the document.
So yeah, let's quickly. Sorry, I'm just going to check something, guys. I think Andy's just typing another one, I think. So yeah, just waiting for it. Sorry, guys.
It's okay. I'm just scrolling the chat. There's so much in
yeah,
there.
it's really hard to know. I mean, I think Andy's covered most of the ones other than the ones he's putting in the form, I'm guessing. No, I'm waiting. Yeah.
No, he's agreeing with you about just claiming the £60 one. Presume there was a bit of a delay there. Awesome.
Oh yeah, it's also a bit of a lag as well, guys.
Yeah.
So,
do you want to do this one?
How about can you do self-assessments? Is it you're always in the same tax year? So yeah, I mean, Andy's already answered it, but yeah, they're only done. So you only do self-assessment when HMRC actually asks you to do a return, or there's basically a special reason for doing a self-assessment tax return. So you only do it if your expenses go above 2,500, or there's another reason why you'd have to do a tax return. So, for example, if you're locum in and you're self-employed, you'd have to do a tax return. If you got rental income, you'd have to do a tax return. So you only do a tax return if you're basically told to, or you're mandated to tell HMRC that you have to do one, basically.
Yeah, and just to reiterate this point, because this is a question we get all the time, especially for GPs, because our exams are like extortionate. Everyone's exams are extortionate, right? But so the GP exams basically cost £2,500 basically now, right? So let's just say 1 year I do thousands of pounds worth of expenses.
Yeah.
Then I do 2,600 the next year, and then the following year I do 1,000 worth of expenses. I only need to do self-assessment for the 1 year, right? Assuming all other things being equal.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, only for that one tax year when you go over.
Yeah.
Just to say, JR, so I know you put a question here. Where do you input on the form to claim for charitable donations?
Not this form.
Yeah, it's not. There's a separate form, I think, for claiming. Let them know about gift aid. You don't put it on this form. This is only for employment expenses. If you're paying a charity, making a donation for your payroll, that should just come off automatically and be treated like that. But if you're making the usual kind of gift aid donations, it doesn't go through this form. It's a separate thing.
Separate form. Okay, cool. All right. It is coming up to an hour. So thank you so much for so many of you coming this evening. Hopefully that was helpful. If it was, we just want as many doctors, dentists, nurses, other healthcare professionals as possible to get what they are rightfully owed. So share the links to the guide with them, and this will be on YouTube as well eventually, again. But otherwise, next Tuesday, we have a session which covers everything. That's at medicsmoney.co.uk/live. And there's actually 2 dates that you can sign up for there. Choose one. Otherwise, I think we can shut down our first YouTube live stream. And I'm not 100% sure how we shut it down, mate.